than the question of corruption, to which most people have zeroed it into. It is a governance crisis that covers a number of areas. It covers issues of corruption, it covers issues of administration, it covers issues of elections, and a host of others. And I think that we really need to find a way of rethinking our position. We have certainly veered off the route that was contemplated by the Constitution.
When the Constitution was passed, people thought that writing in all those commissions and institutions were sufficient safeguards to ensure the malpractices, bad governance of the past, corruption were arrested. Do we still need any more legal institutions or infrastructure to make this happen?
The Constitution expected a lot, and there's nothing wrong with the Constitution.
Yes.
But I would say two things have happened. First is that the legislation, the laws that were enacted to enable that Constitution are wanting, and we can go through a host of them.
Yes.
But secondly, a Constitution is just a document.
Yes.
The document must be made alive by the people who implement it and the people to whom it is to govern. My fear is that apart from the institutions, there's every indication that we as Kenyans generally may have passed a constitution in terms of ethics and integrity that is beyond our time, that we are not prepared to live by. Because given every opportunity, Kenyans continue to show that integrity is not at the top of their list.
Right.
And that is something to worry about.
Yeah, but about those institutions, let's face it, where do you think is our failure? Because there are institutions which were legislated to take charge of those failures. Let's just go through them, nuts and bolts of it. I know normally people are measured when it comes to rating others or assessing others, but where do you think is the main failure, really?
We have failed in a number of ways. First is at the selection stage. It is expected that integrity will be an issue at the forefront. It is evident that in both selective and elective and appointive offices,
yes,
integrity has not been put up there.
Yes.
The second problem is where issues of integrity are raised, then it is expected that it will be discussed, openly, in a bipartisan manner, and expeditiously. It is clear that where these have been raised, either it has usually taken the party lines, or even where it's referred sometimes to the courts or other agencies, it takes inordinately long to determine those issues.
Yeah.
The third failure has been instances where there are allegations of impropriety. It has almost always now been the case that where such instances are raised, it is only raised for purpose of the media and the newspapers, and then we move on and wait for the next one tomorrow, and not focusing on what is it that must be done to remedy that which has been raised.
Yes.
And I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
But what should be done? What can be done?
There are a lot of things that should be done, Mutegi. First of all, I think there are a number of pieces of legislation that we must look at. We need some legislative amendments. We need to relook the Leadership and Integrity Act, which was not up to par, and which territorializes the idea of Chapter 6 to one institution. It is not supposed to be for one institution. It is supposed to be an obligation for a variety of institutions. There are issues, legislation like the Public Officer Ethics Act, which today requires all public officers to declare their wealth.
Yes.
That declaration goes to 11 different agencies. The Act itself says that disclosing the contents of the declaration is criminal.
Yes.
You can't have such a legislation in this day and age if you want to encourage transparency. Those need to be amended. There's legislation like the Commission on Administrative Justice Act, our act, where we have identified a number of gaps, and in the last 3 years, we've urged the Attorney General to bring some amendments. So there are a number of pieces of legislation that should be looked at. That's only one. The second one is, in my view, the executive led by the President may have to rethink its approach to these matters. The executive and all of us in Kenya have taken an approach that is restrictive, an approach that comes from the Public Officer Ethics Act, which says that if you're a public officer and you have been charged with a criminal offense, then you will be suspended on half pay.
Yes.
But that approach speaks to when you are charged with a criminal offense. The expectation in the Constitution is less than when you are charged. When Article 10 talks of accountability, integrity, When Article 73, 75, and 232 talk about conducting yourself in a way that brings honor to your office and all that, it means there are some of those instances when you may have done something or alleged to have done something which does not amount to a criminal offense, but which is improper. I think that the approach to take is that where there are such allegations and there are reasonable grounds for believing that that has happened, even if you have not been charged, you must be asked to step aside so that then the investigations can be conducted and finalized. You ask me what is it that can be done. I think Parliament can play a bigger role. I think Parliament must stop playing partisan politics with integrity issues, where depending on who has been accused, either there's mass support or mass rejection. I think Parliament must, of course, get its act right in terms of its committees. I believe that there are too many committees in Parliament. I believe the position right now is that every member of Parliament is a member of 3 committees, and each committee has about 27 people. And so the tragedy is, even if you disbanded those committees, who will you get to come and fill them? I think the solution lies in changing the standing orders, reduce the number of committees, reduce the number of committees in which every individual can serve, so that it's not automatic you'll be a member of a committee. So you can actually be removed and not be in any committee if you fail the integrity test. I think that Parliament must also focus on the content of some of the reports that have been brought to the House and be serious about it. Many times reports that have been brought to the House are either rejected or passed, and even when they are passed, it's just as an end in itself, so that it is passed, full stop. Parliament, as the representative of the people, is supposed to follow up and is supposed to re-examine every 3 months, 6 months, what has been the rate of implementation of those which we passed, so that the contents, for example, of some of the issues raised in the PAC report, despite the integrity issues around its members, ought to be followed up meaningfully. I can go on and on, but there are a number of things that can be done.
Yeah, but I mean, this is also good, Otiende, but who should be enforcing these things? I mean, where should action issue from? That's the whole point. Is there any of these commissions, your commission, or which commission, or is it the CIC, that needs to initiate measures to remedy these things? Or, well, because it seems to be all over, and nobody, really will take it up, the mantle, or nobody's charged with it.
Well, different agencies must take it, Makali, because our constitutional principle is based on separation of powers.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in the event of disagreement, is the judiciary that makes the determination.
Yeah.
So it is a concerted effort. First of all, starting with the people. There is no one person who can tell Kenyans, change your attitude. It must be a collective effort, We must educate them,
yeah.
We must engage. Has it not struck you that at every opportunity, including lately, when we've been given opportunity to elect people, we tend to go for those whose integrity might be more questionable.
Yes.
And that's a serious indictment.
Because there are the people with money.
Before you come to any other institution,
Yes.
why should Kenyans tend to go for those whose integrity appear to be lowest?
You see, that's why I'm saying it's a universal problem. No, human beings will have to be reined in by force, by controls, which is why I'm asking. So who should intervene? Because if you look at it, for example, and that's where perhaps you need to come in, Parliament would be the one taking up some of these things, because they're people representatives, so they will take up actions that will repair situations that arise. They are totally incapable of doing that because of their divisions of political lines and their own integrity in question. So who should initiate these moves to, for example, when Parliament fails like this? Are we helpless?
A number of institutions. On integrity issues relating to elections, the IEBC must, for the first time now, make a conscious effort that it can determine some people as ineligible, and it has that power under the Constitution. So far, it hasn't done that.
But the IEBC itself is tainted.
Well, let's talk about the institution
that is responsible.
And then we can also focus separately on the individuals in that institution.
Yes, yes.
Those institutions are here to stay because they're in the Constitution.
Yeah.
So I would usually urge not to mix the question of the suitability of the individuals in those institutions vis-a-vis the institution. So talking about the institution for now.
Yes. So the mandate is with
the mandate is with IEBC at the level of vetting. And you'll remember before the last elections, even we wrote to IEBC. We named about certain individuals who we thought were ineligible by reason of integrity. Yeah. The IEBC ignored all of it.
Yes, but that's now the futility.
Anyway, that's one of them, and I'll tell you how we deal with when they ignore it. Yes. IEBC is one.
Right.
I've mentioned the executive in terms of how it deals with persons who have been named. The other thing is to avoid appointing people who there are already ongoing integrity issues. My good friend Honorable Kemo was just appointed, I think, the other day.
Yes, yes.
And we know that there are issues that are still pending in court to date.
Yes.
So the other issue would be to avoid such appointment because it sends the wrong signals. The third intervention would be by the judiciary. Some of the matters that have gone to court take a bit long, and especially matters that are supposed to determine suitability or integrity. You'll remember, for example, the chair of EACC. This is perhaps now the third year when the question of his suitability is still pending now in the Supreme Court. Now, that's not good for anyone.
Yes,
not
yes.
for him, not for the country. You know, we ourselves
So what should we do to the
fast track? That's what I'm
should we-
saying.
In fact,
They
that
have not done
comes
it.
to
What
the
should
core
we
of
do?
your mandate,
Yes.
which is the administration of justice. How long it takes to even arbitrate an issue. The Supreme Court is sitting on issues 3 years for determination on the
engaged with the
suitability
judiciary.
of Matema.
We have engaged with the judiciary because we ourselves, I'll give you another example, have taken a matter to court. One of the people whose names, who is now an honorable member of parliament, whose names we had included in our list, was subsequently elected. We believe on the face of it that he was ineligible on the
contest.
express words of the constitution. We took the matter to court. Now we are going to the third year, and the court is unable to make that determination, and we have raised it with the Chief Justice and all. The idea in it is that just the way we fast-tracked and were able to determine quickly election petitions, issues of integrity in office should be fast-tracked and determined quite quickly.
Right.
So it is not happening.
No.
So you, on your own matter,
Yeah.
you sit there, 3 years and not done.
And
so,
you're the police
Yes,
of
we-
administration of justice.
so what do we do?
My point is this, Mutegi. The idea of enforcing Chapter 6 and integrity must be a collective mandate. It will not be an individual mandate, and that's the point I'm making. We must all be able to play our part, from the citizens, the judiciary, the executive, constitutional commissions, which is now, let me come in there. Ours, and talking about Parliament and its failures, nothing so far on the face of it stops any of us from investigating the matters in Parliament. Usually for good governance, you don't want to bring too many multiple investigations on the same matter because that's another way of killing the matter. And so sometimes you want to try and allow, if one agency is already actively in it, you want to allow them to conclude. And that might instruct part of why many of us have stayed away.
The trouble is they might conclude it
Yes.
unsatisfactorily, and then you cannot revive the same matter
Well,
because that is,
nothing-
again, futility.
It is important to understand this. Nothing stops any of us, especially the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, from investigating any matter merely because a parliamentary committee has investigated it and concluded either way, especially if there are suggestions of criminal offenses amounting to corruption. So it will not matter how Parliament concludes it. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the police still retain the residual mandate to investigate and the DPP to prosecute. So all that can still happen. In our case,
Yes.
we don't have a primary mandate on integrity or corruption matters. We have what we call a complementary mandate. On a scale of 1 to 10, our mandate in this respect is only 1%. Our more primary mandate is on maladministration and the other acts which do not necessarily amount to corruption.
Yes.
We only come into the issues of corruption first by virtue of the Constitution. The Constitution enables us to investigate and take remedial action in respect of abuse of power, improper conduct, and misbehavior in office. Traditionally, when we exercise our general mandate and we discover matters to do with corruption, we would usually now send that bit to the Anti-Corruption Commission.
Yes.
However, where, as has happened, there are allegations against the Anti-Corruption Commission itself, then we activate that little percentage of our jurisdiction to its full effect and investigate them.
Yes.
Or where it's an allegation of impropriety by any of the members of staff against the commissioners, then we would come in. But by and large, it's still the jurisdiction of EACC to investigate. Now, in respect of that little mandate, we've done quite a bit. We have handled complaints. Last year alone, we dealt with 52,000 complaints. We resolved 48,000 of them. The previous year, it was 18,000. So it's been in progress.
That's growing.
Yes, it is. It's really growing. It's quite a bit. We do investigations. We have done certain investigations, usually when it's alleged that there was some impropriety or maladministration. And sometimes in the course of it, we discover that there are issues of corruption. Usually we'll identify and isolate those issues and recommend specific prosecution of named individual. Now, that again is where the interagency comes in. Once you recommend prosecution, we don't have the powers to prosecute and we cannot prosecute. That is entirely enough for the DPP. We are in discussion.
Does the DPP follow in information and prosecute generally? Does
for the matters we have recommended prosecution for, we've gotten response from the DPP confirming that they are following the map, but so far none has been prosecuted.
None.
Because of that, we have suggested some minimal amendments and engaged with the DPP. The undertaking we have from the DPP is that he will be able to gazette at least 3 of our lawyers who are already advocates as prosecutors, but still, working by virtue of his powers, so that where we find these matters, we can ourselves prosecute in the name of the DP. So he still has control, but at least we can fast track it. Now that's what we are working on, and we just had a meeting last week. It is our hope that through some of these measures, amendments and all,
are you capable to institute private prosecutions where, for example, the DPP fails, as he often doesn't undertake some of them? Is anything barring you from instituting private prosecution?
Strictly not, but it would be inappropriate for a number of reasons. First, we are not a private body, we are a public body. It would just look funny if a public body purports to institute a private prosecution as if we were a private member. Secondly, it would send the wrong signals in terms of interagency cooperation. Our ideal situation is where we investigate matters, we recommend for prosecution, we share with the DPP, and we go ahead and prosecute. And if at any stage he decides that that prosecution should be discontinued or altered or changed, then he could come in. Yeah. And that's a way of supplementing the efforts. Yeah. And that's still what we are working on.
Let's look at the matter we are on now, the one of investigating the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. What is it that you're looking into, and how far are you?
We received an anonymous complaint on a number of matters, and we exchanged correspondence, but we zeroed in on 2 things, which recently has been added to a 3rd. The first issue we're looking at is the question that the Deputy Commission Secretary may have been offered and received a salary which was not equal to the other Deputy Commissioner and which was much higher than what was approved, both by the Commission and by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. That's the first matter we're investigating. The second one is we received an allegation that some of perhaps a commissioner and a staff member may have received some houses belonging to NSSF as forbearance for completing or thoroughly investigating certain matters involving NSSF. And as you know, there are a number of matters EACC is investigating on NSSF. The 3rd issue, which has only come in recently, and which we have the full support of EACC to investigate, again is an allegation that some members of EACC may have entered some arrangements with NSSF to run some of its matters, including, I think, a parking lot somewhere in town, in the CBD, which belongs to NSSF, but which it is alleged that the company, given the opportunity to run it, may be associated with some people at EACC. Those are the 3 matters we're investigating.
And is there light at the end of the tunnel, or how far are you with this, and when do we expect some report on that? We
initially had some challenges in terms of cooperation, but that was sorted out. So on the first 2 matters, our report should be out in less than 8 days, 8 to 9 days, because our law requires that whatever findings we have, we must share it with the person against whom the accusation was made so that we get their final response. And that really is where we are. Once we get the response, then we tide it and release it. The 3rd issue, which only came in last week, might take a little bit of time, so we'll handle it separately, the question of the parking lot, perhaps about another 30 or so days.
So what is the end result of your investigation? The report, and then what? You pass it on to the DPP or again to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to commence further investigations?
Not so, not so. If it involves a staff member then usually the staff members are dealt with at the level of the commission. We will make a determination and a finding saying this is what we found in respect to this staff member, and in our view, therefore, they should be removed from office, or they didn't do anything wrong, or they should be cautioned, or if there are any monies that were unlawfully paid, perhaps they must be refunded and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If it's in respect of a commissioner and we think we've concluded it, either we find there was no wrongdoing or there was wrongdoing such that they ought to be removed from office, which then means we send that recommendation to Parliament, or it was not fundamental and that therefore it just invites a caution or any variety of matters.
Yeah.
If, of course, there's a criminal offense, then again we recommend prosecution on account of that criminal offense.
Now, what are we to do with the judiciary? In that case of inordinately delaying matters, say for instance the matter of suitability, or the issue of the Commission of Land, the National Land Commission, and the Ministry. Those two matters are pending, and everybody is complaining every day. What are we to do with the judiciary so that matters are not delayed?
What we are to do is what sometimes we do very well as Kenyans. Bring pressure to bear.
How?
Raise the issues with the Chief Justice. Usually they are open forum. There's even a Judicial Services Week, a whole week when we are supposed to engage with the judiciary. We need to do that. Kenyans have a right to petition, and there's nothing wrong with us petitioning by way of letter the Chief Justice that these matters that are pending, that are critical to us as a nation, ought to be finalized and finalized quickly. On our part, and as the chair of CAJ, I have raised this with the Chief Justice. We have also raised it in another forum, what we call the Chairs Forum. That is the forum of all chairs of constitutional commission. And you do not want to interfere with judicial discretion, but you still want to bring pressure to bear such that you can have quick determination of matters without bringing undue pressure. So we must just all collectively have to sustain it. There's no other way. If it became clear that it was a particular lawyers, and sometimes lawyers hold these matters, then the law society must come in to rein in the lawyers who delay. If it is a particular judge, then a complaint can also be raised in respect of that judge, now to the Judicial Service Commission, in terms of unreasonable delay. So all this collectively is what will assist us.
Last week, in the case of Wetangula, the Supreme Court found out that although there had been allegations that he committed criminal offenses during elections, he was not prosecuted. So the judge said, since he was not prosecuted, they can do nothing about it. So he remains in office.
Well, I have not read the Wetangula case. But part of the other issue I have raised, and I had said that all of us have pockets of what we need to do, is the judiciary has tended to avoid and escape making blunt determinations on issues of integrity. Since the new constitution was promulgated, there are only two cases where the judiciary boldly pronounced itself. That is the first judgment by the High Court in the Matemu case, and then there was another complaint, I think, by against Waititu by Judge Ngugi.
Yes.
But in the Matemu case went to appeal, all right, but the Waititu case, although it was bold, it didn't go that far. In all subsequent cases, you will find an escapist tendency by the judiciary. When integrity issues are brought before it, it will say, well, it is not for us to determine, go to the other body, even where that other body has failed, or such other things. I think that if we want to go anywhere with integrity issues, the courts are the final arbiters. They must be clear, they must be bold, they must pronounce themselves in no uncertain terms that these are the expectations of the Constitution, and you have either fallen below or above it. And so I've not read the Wetangula case, but I am not one to support escapism by the judiciary because they are the last hope for the nation.
Let's look at, focus strictly on Parliament and the goings on there. A lot of allegations of impropriety or inability of Parliament to perform its functions because it's being compromised. Members are compromised. What is the appropriate intervention? Because people are saying, well, so what if members of Parliament are found to be corrupt? They're on the take. What is the process that what is the public recourse to this mess? Let's put it that way.
Three things in respect of Parliament. I think the first thing is the approach that the Speaker has taken, which for me is laudable, and it needs to extend, Where there are serious allegations against a committee, especially by members of the committee itself, it is right and proper that that committee should be dissolved, pending proper investigations. And that is assuming that those investigations are proper and objective. That's inside of Parliament. The second thing to do is bodies that are charged, and primarily the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, with investigating corruption, should come in and investigate those aspects of corruption without waiting for the results of that probe, because it has nothing to do with it. Parliament is not a body that investigates criminality. Yeah. It can investigate wrongdoing, but not criminality. So EACC and the police must come in and specifically investigate those allegations of corruption, those who are said to have given, those who are said to have received, and all those things, and we have them charged. The third issue that must happen moving forward is part of the impunity you see in Parliament relates to the defeat of the right of recall as contemplated in the Constitution.
Yes.
Parliament passed a law that is impossible to implement in terms of recall. If some of this, if the MPs knew that you can be recalled on grounds, including of lack of integrity, they would take the integrity a lot more seriously. But the law, which in my respectful view is unconstitutional, which disables people from recalling their MPs despite that right being in the Constitution,
granted, yes,
is law that must be reconsidered, is law perhaps that needs to be challenged sooner in court, is law that must be declared unconstitutional. If you were able to recall some of these members of Parliament, the bar of integrity in Parliament would rise higher.
Mm. Well, just before we end, looking at your mandate, a lot of people still don't understand, of course, what remedies you can avail to them. What really should people approach you for in this country, the Commission on the Administration of Justice?
Broadly, as the Office of the Ombudsman, we have a mandate which every ombudsman has everywhere in the world, and that is to deal with maladministration. Maladministration simply means administration gone wrong. So any complaint against any public or public officer by any member of the public can come to us. It could include inaction, they just don't act, or delay, or non-responsiveness, or lateness, or avoidance, or any of those things. Any officer, public officer, who does not do what they ought to do, or who does something they ought not to do, is a candidate for bringing to us in terms of complaints. Once they come to us, and this is yet another journey we are working with the judiciary, unlike other ombudsman offices in the world, our office, like the South African office, is giving a mandate in the Constitution to take remedial action. All other ombudsmen in the world only make recommendations.
Yeah.
The judiciary in this country is yet to appreciate that distinction. And the judiciary, in at least one case that is unfortunate, which we are appealing, has suggested that we can only make recommendations. Now, when the Constitution says take remedial actions, it means take a remedy. And that remedy must be implemented. It's not just a recommendation.
Yeah.
But the judiciary, therefore, to this extent, has not helped us by suggesting that it's only a recommendation. Now, we are in a country, as you know, where even court orders are disobeyed.
Yes.
How much less if it was a recommendation? So we are now in this process of persuading the judiciary to understand, at least that one case, which is unfortunate, that in recognizing the words of the Constitution, it helps the judiciary and the entire country to raise the integrity standard, so that when we find a wrong, then we remedy it. We don't just make a recommendation. And in so doing, we not only collectively raise the integrity standards,
yeah,
we'll also reduce the number of backlog of cases that are pending in court.
Yeah. In terms of you've been in office about 3 years. What are the things that you've done that you think stand out, that perhaps can draw the public's attention to what you do? Like in this particular case, we did this, so we got this, we acted in this manner.
A number of things. First, we deal basically with complaints. This is now our third year. In our first year, we received 4,000 complaints. We resolved 1,600. That's about 32%, because it was our first year. By our second year, we received 18,200 cases. We resolved 11,400. That's about 62%. Last year, we received 52,000. We resolved 48,000. That's almost 80%. Now, so the first significant matter is all these matters, they may not individually stand out for the headlines, but they are matters that affect ordinary Kenyans in their ordinary life and impact them positively.
Yeah.
The other thing we do is we do investigations. and not for, we don't do investigation for each case. For every 100 cases, maybe we do investigations in 3 or 4 matters. In the last 3 years, we have done about 36 separate aspects of investigations. Now, I could not go through all of them, but for example,
Yes.
we investigated NSSF, and that's part of our problem now with EACC and NSSF. We discovered that NSSF, first, the investigations by EACC at NSSF had gone on for so long and they had not been finalized. We made appropriate recommendations. We discovered that NSSF had released 80 million shillings to an individual to pay the county government of Nairobi for some rates, which was not paid. And we specifically recommended the prosecution of that person and that that money be refunded. That is something we are still following up with the DPP and EACC. We investigated the issue of acquisition of prison's land in Machakos. People went inside Machakos prison and were able to acquire private land. 13 different titles. You go through the main gate and then you get there. We found that it was all unlawfully acquired. We were able to recover voluntarily from one of the people who gave us the title document, surrendered it back. The other 12 we submitted to the National Land Commission to now follow up and get it back. The same issue we investigated in Kisii, and we found that Kisii town has a big problem.
Yeah.
Most of the land was taken by those who were politically connected at the time. You will remember that Professor Ongeri then sued us,
Yes, for
claiming that
naming
we
him
shouldn't.
unfairly, yeah.
Yeah. But it is important to know
Yes.
he did not sue us for saying that he had acquired the land. The case that is in court is that he alleges, which we dispute, that he did not receive the notice I was talking about, when we are now finally naming you. He did not actually receive the notice, but we had sent it by registered post in the last known address. So there have been a number of such investigations, and whenever we investigate, then we investigated Kenya Institute of Curriculum and Development. Remember where Dr. Nzomo was?
Yes.
We found that she was continuing in office as director. At a time, there was a new act which required a new director. Now, you'll remember that that was implemented, and that's how she left, and now there's a new director.
Yeah.
I think Dr. Juan or somebody.
Yes.
We also found that there are some people who are unlawfully employed there, who are relatives without any process.
Yes.
And we recommended that they be retired in public interest. And we are following up that process with the new team.
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
Now, talking about that, there was a matter which is pending before the president of judges who were nominated for appointment by the Judicial Service Commission.
Yes.
And of course, they were not. The president took half, the others were left hanging. There has been talk that some of them have quietly gone back to the magisterial positions. What is the actual position? Are they still magistrates if they were from the judiciary, or if they were in private practice, have they gone back? Are they earning salaries on the basis of their promoted? What is the position on that?
Well, the position for now is that, yes, until you are appointed and sworn in, you are not a judge. So you can go back to doing whatever else you are doing, if you are selling clothes or whatever else you are doing before that process.
Yes.
But the critical question is it within the discretion of the president to refuse to swear in some judges?
Yes.
The position of the Constitution, as far as I understand, is no.
No. Yeah.
You must act in accordance with that. But the matter is in court, as you know.
The Judiciary, GIC went to
the Law Society of Kenya went to the High Court to challenge that matter, and it's pending before the court.
Okay.
And we are actually contemplating joining in that amicus.
Finally, you have said so many people, of course, have raised complaints, 52,000 the last 1 year. How do they get to you? And would you not be considered, are you at the county levels? Because just why I'm saying that is a lot of malpractice, maladministration happens at the county level government. People have no access or recourse when they are denied or unfairly treated. How are you able to tap this, let me say, clientele?
That is true. It is actually quite true, Makali, that beyond what's happening at the national level, there's a lot of maladministration at the county level, including especially by county government.
Yes. Yeah.
Our initial contemplation and expectation was that we would be present in each county. But that contemplation was quickly dashed with the first budgetary allocation that we were given and subsequent budgetary allocations. What we have done, therefore, is that realizing that we cannot get enough money to be in every county, we have innovatively engaged with the government, we have engaged with the county government and other players. We have engaged with some willing donors, especially within the UN family, and we've opened branches in Mombasa, in Kisumu, through the assistance of UNDP. We have engaged with the executive, and in the last financial year, I directly engaged with the president, and our budgetary allocation was extended, and we are now able to recruit a few more. We are recruiting at least 25, 15 of whom are lawyers, and through that we are able to send them. We are sending them to 15 different locations within the country, not each county, but representative.
In the regions.
And in those regions, some will operate from the Huduma centers, and we are already present in many Huduma centers. Some will operate from offices that we have agreed with governors to provide just the space without the control. And there are at least a number of governors who have agreed to that facilitation. There are actually governors who are concerned about governance. Okay. And some will operate from our own branch offices. So in the next 1 or 2 months, we will be present in 17 different locations. Currently,
can you just name where you are?
For now, we are in Nairobi, we are in Mombasa, we are in Kisumu. We are extending to Eldoret, to Nakuru, Nyeri, Isiolo, Garissa. Then for the counties, there's Bomet, there's Siaya, I think there's Kiambu, there's Narok, a host of them, but at least 17 different locations.
How do we know that these officers who are sent to the counties will be doing what they're supposed to do and not go doing like everybody else, and seeking? How do you actually?
There is no way of knowing that short of being our Lord Jesus. But we can only put mechanisms of control. And the mechanism of control is that all those officers we second, there's a very close supervision mechanism which we have exercised for the last 3 years, even with the branch officers we have, so that they are quality controlled from here. And one of the ways of quality controlling is that all these 52,000 cases, for example, I'm talking about, none of them do we bring a closure unless I review, so that I'm sure that whoever was dealing with it did the right thing, so that I'm sure that the citizen is not shortchanged, so that if I conclude that there's something that was not done, then we actually reopen it and continue with it. So there's quality control at the level of their supervisor, at the level of their director, then at my level as the chair.
Okay.
That's how we do it.
All right, we have to thank you, and our time is up. Always a pleasure to have you. Dr. Otiende Amollo, the chairman of the Commission, the Administration of Justice, one of the constitutional commissions. It's sort of your public complaints commission. If you have a problem about how you handle your administrative issues, fired unfairly or not treated well, reach the complaints ombudsman. I'll call it the complaints commission, but it's part of the ombudsman of Kenya. Thank you for coming, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.